Evening all. Okay, I thought this week, evening all on Twitch and play chess. Oh, let's get rid of the echo. Okay, so this week the British Chess Championship has started, the 100th British Chess Championship. I played in it myself twice before. I once qualified and once was lucky to get a transfer opportunity for the Major Open. It's played in a fantastic place in Torquay. Really enjoyed it there when I played. Okay. I've been checking out the games and I thought, okay, might as well take a break from Morphe this week and look at some of the games, the interesting games, I thought. And sometimes I know some of the players, that makes them more interesting for me personally. Here's one today from round 2, just played today. Si1 Williams against Richard Weaving. And at the moment, you know, there's quite a mixed ratings, so it's not always Grandmaster against Grandmaster. So here's Si1 Williams 2-4-8-1. He's playing against, you know, Richard Weaving 2-1-9-6. Bit of a rating difference. So he kicked off with D4, Si1 Williams, and Richard Weaving played knight F6, C4, E6, and here avoiding Limsa Indian, playing knight F3. So this is Queen's Indian territory. Black plays now D5. So Black's play looks very sensible and solid. Knight C3. Now Black takes on C4, and Si1 Williams doesn't have to pick up this pawn immediately. He just plays E4 here at leisure. He doesn't have to go in for any check or anything. He wants to take this pawn with his bishop to get developed. Black plays bishop B4, and it seems to present a problem with White's move that the E4 pawn is loose here. So does White really want to take on C4? Now I wonder what you guys would play here. Just already, I don't know, it's opening theory or something, but please avoid looking at the score sheet if you want to play chess. But what would you play here with White? So if you had White in this position, if I gave you 20 seconds, what would you play here? Okay, I should really wait for all of you to come actually for this 20-second game, but it's starting. Okay, but a really dynamic move I thought was played here. And it's actually one of the reasons I picked this game. I kind of like, I'm attracted to dynamic chess. So bishop takes c4, just offering the e4 pawn. I don't know if this may be theory, probably most likely is. So the e4 pawn is taken, and this is why I found the game interesting, because what is really going on here? Where is White's compensation? White just casually castled, and actually there are some problems here now. If the black knight goes back, for example, if the black knight wanted to go back, you might think that's a good idea to hold the fort, but you know, maybe you know, just check and then knight e5. This, I haven't really checked this with Engine, but this looks as though it might be interesting to consider. But black actually took on c3, which seems sensible enough. Takes, and he doesn't really want to win another pawn here. I think this is far too dangerous to take this other pawn. He just drops back, and it looks as though White hasn't got okay, where is White's compensation for the pawn? The black king is still able to castle. Okay, let's see what happened. Knight e5. Black castled now. A pawn down. But there's pressure, isn't there? So after queen g4, White's now threatening things like bishop h6, just on g7. So is there enough compensation for the pawn? Well, we see knight d7, and now rook e1, knight f6, queen parks on g3, knight d5. So black's got a problem actually with this bishop. If he ever tried b6 and then maybe knight c6, so got a bit of a problem with that bishop as well, to bear in mind. For the moment here, white plays bishop h6, threatening mate now. That's defended. And now a nice, interesting looking rook lift, rook e4, as though white's really interested in this kind of, you know, bishop g7s for rook g4, or just rook g4, either is potentially dangerous. Maybe bishop g7, rook g4, there's queen f6 though. Okay, so anyway, so knight e7, and now, you know, black seems to be, you know, that seems to be a good idea to put the knight on f5 to attack the queen. So the bishop just drops back here. So white is playing a pawn down, but with, you know, abstract compensation, pressure. There's nothing completely tangible just yet. So for those of you just joining, this is Si1 Williams, British Grandmaster Si1 Williams 2481 against Richard Weaving 2196. So there's, white has some compensation here, but let's see what it is. Knight f5, queen d3, and now knight d6 looks as though this looks a bit awkward, losing this light square bishop. Wasn't that going to be useful? Once the rook goes back, black's tempted now to take that light square bishop, which he is. Which he does, rather. Knight takes c4, queen takes c4. This bishop remains a problem though. We see c6. So it's a bit blocked in by its own pawns. So white's got this grip on e5. So I wonder, I mean, it looks as though it's easier to play for white, at the very least. So queen e2. And now we see c5, trying to undermine a bit white's central control. The queen on d8 is actually ideally placed to put pressure on d4 as well. Interestingly, white just takes on c5. He's got a good enough grip on e5 to do this. Queen d5, and now he gains a bit of time. Black's going to try and regain the pawn, but there's a crucial bit of time here now to create some threats, it seems. White plays knight g4, attacking the bishop. Black doesn't really want double pawns here, so he puts the bishop on e7. And now we see bishop d6, and so this defensive bishop is being taken away with bishop d6, giving back the pawn to still be a pawn down. So bishop takes d6, c takes, and this is a potentially dangerous pawn if rook d1. So that queen takes the pawn, but in this position, can you see what white played here? A really amazing move. If I give you 20 seconds starting from now, white to play. So what did Si1 Williams play in this position? Anyone? So white to play. A nice forcing move. Okay. Knight f6 check. Knight f6 check. So what's going on here? If black takes this knight, then I imagine that check. Unless black wants to give up the queen, this is really quite dangerous. Queen g4, threatening mate, and black hasn't got rook g8. We just take, and you see this disconnected rook issue is exposed here. That even that first rank, the king cannot be helped. So black cannot really take that knight. He plays king h8, but now very direct attacking move, just threatening mate again. Rook h3, threatening mate with the knight and rook. Black hasn't got too many choices here. G takes just looks as hopeless as ever before after queen h5. Or is it? It does seem so, because h7, you can't really defend h7 here because the rook's on protecting d3. So this looks terminal here. So black played h7 6. And now the final move of the game is very simple, just Queen E3 threatening, Rook takes H6, and black doesn't seem to have any defense available, and he had to resign here. So I thought that was a game I picked up today because it looked interesting. This pawn sacrifice to me made the game dynamically interesting. If we go back to the opening, you know, sometimes you can play kind of casually in the opening, it seems, drop a centre pawn. But the key thing is, you know, black's defence is on the king side, and the rooks, if we looked at the rooks on this game, they never really got connected. So maybe that's the compensation for being a pawn down. If we look at the rooks, look at white's rooks, quick mobilisation like a Morphy game. White's rooks are connected here and ready, you know, to roll into the attack. Black's rooks, it's that bishop on C8 really, which this is all an issue for G8 later. So we see this coming to bear fruit later, when white's getting this quite fast attack. Still there's no resolution on this issue of the disconnected rooks, and here bishop D6 takes away a key defender which was holding black's king safety, and it looks like a neat finish. The question was, Queen E4 possible as well? Probably. It looks like a crushing move as well. Thing, mate. I wonder, G6? Maybe not as accurate because of G6 possibly. Because if takes, we've got King G7 now. Or maybe just Queen H4. Possibly that's winning as well. But yeah, it was good enough just to play Queen E3. So I thought that was an interesting game. Hope you did. Let's have a look at another game from the championships. So Chris Ward, another grandmaster, I think he's a dance coach now for something like salsa dancing. He's not. He's like ventured out a bit. So anyway, he's playing in the championship, and he played D4. So he's playing here in round 1. He's rated 2432, and he's playing J Friedland 2093. So we've got a real mix of ratings, and this game was of interest to me because it was a King's Indian defence, the Simish variation, and so this Simish variation is very interesting. Knight Bd7, and white plays now Knight H3, exploiting the fact the bishop's not eyeing H3. So this knight wants to come to F2. So white's getting a nice position here, not necessarily going for a hack attack on the king side, just stopping black's counterplay. Although the knight looks pretty for a moment on E5. Bishop D2, Queen C7, Bishop E2. It looks as though F4 is going to kick this knight pretty soon. E6, and that happens now. F4 kicking the knight back. And white's not playing to castle queen side, he just castles king side. E takes. And this is quite interesting. I've had to play like the black side of this just recently in a 30-minute game. Yes, it looks very similar to this. And what white's move here is quite interesting. How would you take on D5 here? If I gave you 20 seconds starting from now, what are the perks of taking on D5 with the C pawn, the E pawn, and the knight? I mean, can you weigh them up? And I mean, what would be your personal choice? If I give you 20 seconds here to think about that. Anyone? I mean, I think it's personal preference, perhaps. I think white can play C takes. I think the knight does lose a pawn, yeah. Taking the knight is probably the worst. Cause, no, hang on. Taking the knight is feasible because this knight's on E4 anyway. Oh, unless this pawn you're talking about. This pawn. have a look. We might be losing this pawn, yeah. Okay, but anyway, so probably take with the knight's not a good idea. Actually, the e pawn took here. The e pawn, not the c pawn. And so white's sharing that e file, no target on e4. So we see b6. And black's counterplay is difficult to generate here, it seems. Queen c2. And this looks a bit odd to play rook a7. A bit grovelly. Now bishop d3, and it looks as though white might be interested in f5 at some point without giving up the e5 square too quickly. Rook e8. And white challenges that e file. Rook takes, knight f8. So white's got a nice position here without too much risk at all here, it seems. And plays actually f5. And I think if white's given another move, this could get really quite dangerous. I mean, even maybe g4, g5, f6 might be on the cards. So this pawn is actually removed here, but black removes this pawn. I can't see what he's doing in this position. It looks kind of a miserable position here. He just takes on f5, which does fragment some pawns though. These two in particular. Bishop takes, queen takes. And it's a difficult position. White's also got, you know, options of knight e4 here, and maybe this f file is going to be good. And I think black's next move might not be the most accurate. Black played h6, and can you guess what white played here? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Okay, yeah, there's a slight weakness of this move. Bishop takes h6, because this knight is a bit loose. It's only that bishop protecting the knight. Okay, so he's nabbed a pawn. That does take. Queen takes, bishop g7. He pins the bishop now. Queen d7. And now this menacing move, knight g4, threatening immediately knight f6 check. So knight h7 defends that. Queen f4. And okay, f5 now is played, which does weaken the e6 square. This is a bit of a nice square for white, this e6 supported by the d5 pawn. Check. Bishop takes, queen takes. This rook can just come into the position like with these two squares potentially. In fact, after king h8, he uses e6 here, and he's actually on d6. These pawns are actually all targets. Pressure along this 6th rank is a bit unpleasant. So black's actually falling to bits. It seems as though black, you know, got into a passive position, but never had really any counterplay. Bit of a miserable game. Nice for white to have such a game. So queen f7, rook takes d6. After rook a8, he doesn't go for the b6 pawn. Maybe he is concerned a bit about this. He actually offers trade queens. Black avoids that. And now rook d7 threatening mate. Queen g8. And now white doesn't want the exchange of queens. That could win as well, but queen takes. It's all over really. It's horrible threats, unlike check here. Rook e8, defending against that for a moment, but knight e4. And in this position, black's not got too many useful moves. The queen is stuck there holding h7. Knight f6 is coming in pretty soon, I think, unless check does anything. So black actually resigned here. So that was, I thought that was an interesting game, because I thought it was quite controlling counterplay. You know, black didn't really get much counterplay, and white doesn't need to play for the like queenside castling. White can just get this grip on the position, very comfortable grip, and just win seemingly without too many difficulties. I thought that was a neat game. So let's go on to another one. Okay. Now this occurred today. The top seed in the tournament, Gawain Jones, is playing black against Dave Ledger. I've had some good games against Dave Ledger. I have actually. I was lucky to beat him once or twice in the past, and he's obviously beaten me. He's a strong FM. So he was up against Gawain Jones. I think it was last year or the year before. In the last round, Jones smashed him in the dragon. So it was interesting to see that the game did start with e4, and we saw a Sicilian kind of dragon emerge after knight c3 g6. So Dave Ledger not afraid of Gawain Jones's dragon, and I think everyone assumes Gawain is really heavily booked up on this. So does White really want to play this mainline stuff, try and castle queenside? But he does. He plays bishop e3 and then f3, and it's all pretty logical, this setup really. So White's just geared up to exchange off this bishop one day and just use the h file, which will activate the rook. Why not? So black did castle, bishop c4, bishop d7, White castles queenside, and I think, is this the Chinese dragon? Rook b8. So none of this knight e5 or knight a5 and rook c8. It's a different plan, rook b8. So black's not moving the a pawn either. It's not moving the knight. It seems to be designed for a quick b5 at some point. Taking on d4 first maybe. So actually after bishop b3, no, we don't. Black didn't take on d4. Black played knight a5, and okay, so black's ready made for b5 b4, it seems. Well, he played g4, and we see b5 and this classic exchange of bishops, bishop h6. And if black's not careful here, maybe a move like knight f5 could be thematic for this g file, maybe at some point. Black actually took on h6, inviting the queen to h6. So the queen needs some support from another piece, like h4 h5 would help for that h file, or knight f5 has to be calculated all the time. So what happened here? b4 happened here. Knight d5 is useful for getting rid of that defensive knight, and now Gawain took on b3, and a critical decision here: should the knight waste time coming back, or should pawn take it? Actually the knight came back here. Knight takes b3, and then we see in this position knight takes d5, and e takes d5, and it looks as though, okay, this pawn here, how is that helping? Maybe e7 could be a problem at some point on this e file, or maybe this rook could swing across or something quite quickly, maybe. But this next move is interesting. It seems that one idea I think black has with this next move, by playing e5, well, it means the queen's free to come to the rescue, but it is accepting a weak d6 pawn. On the other hand, White has to carefully consider if he really wants to take this just for the d6, because that bishop there is going to threaten this knight. If that knight's removed, then black's got access to a5, because the knight is holding that a5 square. So a lot of things need to be factored in here just to this decision of taking or not. If White doesn't take en passant here, is it too slow? I mean, for example, say white plays h4, maybe queen f6 and then queen g7, maybe. So white actually did take en passant. This livens things up because now there's another target as well, this d6 pawn. We see after h4 things are really sharp here, and I put this on TV earlier. I haven't got a smart TV, I've just got a PlayStation, so I did that yesterday as well, and you know, just to check out, you know, just looking at the TV, and I thought is Gawain got something up his sleeve here, because he's the 26-4-3 GM, and I thought, is his attack going to be quicker than white's here? All white needs to do, in principle, is play h5, unless g5 is a big problem. But even then, you know, if the queen's the only thing holding g5, and white wants a draw, then it's going to be easy to draw this position. For example, I mean, with rook d6, that would be dangerous. So I'm not really sure this g5 is that useful. I mean, for example, a5, say a5, h5, g5. Maybe, you know, like rook d6 guarantees a draw if takes check. We've got a draw by repetition, and against like the top seeds in the tournament, this wouldn't be that bad. So I started to think, isn't white's position quite good here? Because g5 surely is not the idea of this. So anyway, so black actually in this position did play bishop takes b3, a takes b3, and I thought, well, maybe here the idea might be, okay, say rook b5 is another try. But again, it doesn't seem to really do the trick. You know, after h5, g5, we've got this d6 pawn now. That can't be good for black, surely. So actually, the idea here was revealed. Queen a5, and I really felt here, if white loses too much time, he could be in big trouble. If he plays king b1, I thought white would be in big trouble. I haven't engine analysed this, by the way. Just rook b6 just seems absolutely logical, just to go to a6 and then threaten to mate white. So let's see, you know, if h5 here, rook a6, what do we do about this? If we play c3, this starts to look a bit nasty. Check. Well, even here, you know, the queen's attack, that's not so clear. So black has to play even something else, maybe. No, black plays b takes. B takes, that's important. To threaten, check, and mate pretty quickly. So that would be a disaster for white, wouldn't it? This position. So white cannot play in this position king b1, but it looks as though there isn't too much going on. It's only two rooks and the queen each. Can white really, if he plays an accurate move here, should he really be worse? And he did actually play king, not king b1, but h5. He's inviting this check. Although it seems to win the pawn and maybe go back to g7, he invites it. So check, king d2. The queen did take, well, it's attacked now. The queen is actually attacked as well as hg is a threat. So queen takes b2, h takes g, and I just thought queen g7 cannot be that good here. White will be better in this end game. He can't try and win with queen g7. It's only white with winning chances, surely. White can just take and, you know, take. How can white be worse in this sort of position? I didn't think that was possible for white to be worse here, or maybe even white can even think about taking like this and control this h file. Maybe this looks quite dangerous as well. So this wasn't the idea, queen g7. Black just went in for a perpetual check. Top seed of the tournament, he just plays check, check, check. White dare not try and cross over here. He'll just get mated, I think. He doesn't want to do this. you know, this would be horrible, it'd be a waste. So no, you just want content with a draw against the top seed. Just let black have the perpetual check, and that's exactly what happened. So congratulations, I think, are in order for Dave Ledger, holding his own against Gawain Jones, the 2-6-4-3. So he's outrated by more than 300 FIDE points, and I think that's pretty good going. I don't know about you guys, but I think you'd be happy with that, wouldn't you? So that's the top seed of the tournament being held to a draw today. Okay, so let's have a look at another game. Okay, so now this game is of interest to me because Simon Knott, I am Simon Knott, is in one of my leagues. He's one of the most feared IMs in the Hertfordshire League, and my club is in Barnet in the Hearts Division 1 League. And I think I know the person with white. I think the person with white plays a lot on Chesscube. I'm not gonna say anything more. I think he's a high-rated player on Chesscube, so he's playing the British Championship, and he's playing against Simon Knott, a strong IM in the Hearts League. And we see here now, what I find interesting about this game is white sometimes thinks it's easy to get a draw against the French defence against a higher rated player with the exchange variation of the French defence. So Mulla rated 2076. This is in round 1. He's played against, you know, I am Simon Knott 2318. Okay, and he plays now the exchange variation. Oh dear. The thing that makes me laugh is, you see, the thing that makes me laugh, to be honest, right, is people that play the exchange variation. I can see it can be played in blitz, but to go for a one-day game and go and play the exchange French seems to me often just a waste of a day for both the person playing it and their opponents, because you've got this symmetrical pawn structure, pawns at the soul of chess. So, but there are dynamic methods black has, like an early c5. But in this game, what we see, which is I find quite interesting, is white playing knight f3, and black not bothering even with a quick c5. Black just plays symmetrically, as if he's not too bothered at the moment about this, about pure symmetry. Okay, so what happens here? Bishop d3, and black plays bishop d6. So nothing at all fancy really about black's play. Both sides now castle. And we see h3, which seems quite logical, doesn't it? To prevent the pin. Why would h3 be a bad move? Well, actually now here black does inject some dynamism into the position. I'm not entirely sure why white wanted to do this, but black injects some dynamism with c5. So I recently did this video with Paul Giorgio on the Exchange French, and c5 was mentioned earlier as a dynamic opportunity, and there's a very quick win of Korchnoi playing c5. So black doesn't mind getting an isolated queen's pawn here. That's the key thing. And I would have thought if white wants to be like really stodgy here, white could play the move c3. I'm not entirely sure, but maybe, you know, that's quite passive. It looks as though white's playing passively here, but it looks the more stodgy option. But actually white actually played d takes c5, so we have an unbalanced pawn structure. Black's got the isolated queen's pawn, but this bishop is often very, very useful. So let's see now, knight c3. And now it does look as though, you know, bishop g5 would be useful, so black actually plays h6, mirroring the h3. Bishop f4, knight c6. There's actually a subtle positional trump card black seems to have, which is about to be demonstrated. a3, a6, queen d2, and it looks as though bishop takes h6 might be a serious threat here with this battery, but black very calmly plays rook e8. I'm not entirely sure. You know, bishop takes it. I haven't really checked it out. I don't think it works for this reason intuitively, that black can just play bishop f8 at any time and everything's defended. There's no time to get anything in once bishop f8 happens. So white didn't go bishop takes h6. White played just rook fe1, bishop e6, rook ad1. And now we see this plan of using this c file, because black has also got this c file to work with. And look what black does now. Rook ac8 and now b5. It looks as though black is playing on that c file. That's what black's kind of compensation is in part. Queen c1, bishop f8, knight e5, and we see knight a5. This c4 square is actually quite juicy for black with that rook on c8. Queen d2, knight c4, and black's already collecting the light square bishop now. Bishop takes, b takes, queen e3, and now black shows some teeth. It really does transform the whole position now. This next move, g5, very aggressive. Bishop h2, bishop g7. Things are really unbalanced here in terms of the pawn structure. So who would have thought this was from the exchange French? Queen a7 looks a bit artificial, this move. Queen's evicted, goes to c5. Queen c8, black doesn't mind the exchange of queens, white avoids that. But queen b7, a bit of pressure on maybe b2. Does that need to be handled? Apparently not. h4, just going to try and weaken black's king. But here now we see knight. A weakness of the last move is this g4 square, and black plays knight g4 using that pin on the queen. So it looks quite vicious. Now hg, hg, bishop g3, and now another really aggressive move. All of a sudden black's pawns are looking extremely aggressive. Black plays f5 as though he's going to shut down this g3 bishop. Well, he is going to. Queen d2, f4, knight takes, bishop takes g4, and it looks absolutely miserable now. If white has to play bishop h2, that looks terrible. Like d4 looks good. So white doesn't want his bishop shut down, so he lets black have a menacing pawn now on g3. He plays f3. Black just takes on g3, and white doesn't bother taking this piece back. He just plays knight takes d5. So I think something's gone badly wrong here. Black calmly just plays bishop e6. So black's a piece up. Where's the compensation? Well, actually there is a nasty pin though. Rook d e1. Was this white's idea? This pin looks a bit nasty. We see a counter pin with rook ad8. And now to white's credit, it looks like a very clever move to consider. White plays knight e7 check. So that if rook takes, we can take this rook. But black just takes with the queen. After rook takes e6, black's still a piece up. Rook takes d2. And now white resigned. So the exchange French defence is not a guarantee of a draw when playing an international master. That was quite a game, I thought, for showing that you can win with black, but just making the pawn structure a little bit dynamic. And that c file was really quite aggressive for black, because you know black had played like this, and that c4 square collected the light square bishop. So I thought that was an interesting game, just positionally, how black was gaining some stuff out of the position. So I thought that was a neat game, and this aggression on the king side. So he won a piece, and that was it. So I thought that was an interesting game anyway. So let's have a look at another. So now here, Gawain Jones in the first round. This is another game yesterday I put on the TV. I haven't got a smart TV, I just put it on TV with PlayStation. So it was on board 1 for the British Championship yesterday. So Gawain Jones playing white. So he's against John Reed, who's in one of my leagues as well, the Middlesex League, and he had a fantastic season, I think, in the Middlesex League just gone. So he's like 210 ECF. I think he had a fantastic season. So let's see what happens. So E4 from Gawain, C5, C3, the Alpine or C3 Sicilian, Alpine's version, D6, D4, Knight F6, Bishop D3, and it seems black can risk, it seems in principle that white wants to keep his centre intact, you'd think. Doesn't white want to keep the D4 pawn intact here? I mean, okay, after G6, can you guess what white played though, if I give you 20 seconds starting from now? So what would you play as white? These sort of moves I find, fascinating. You think from a certain point of view you'd want to keep the pawns intact, but there's certain specific advantages to be gained, it seems, from examining and maybe even playing D takes C5, which is what was played. So we see D takes C5, and the idea is E5 now. So what is going on here? If Knight D7, I think E6 looks quite tasty. Although I'm not 100%. No, I think I am. Am I? Knight E5. Does black survive this? Anyway, Knight D7 wasn't played, but Knight D5 might run into Bishop B5 check. Like this. I don't know if this is possible, taking on D5. And if Knight C6, you could fracture black's pawns, I think. But maybe this is playable. Maybe Knight D5 is playable, actually. But in the game, we see the odd-looking Knight H5 played. And this started to look quite interesting to me. So white played now. Actually, a strange-looking move as well. White played H3. Maybe he doesn't want this pin, which would happen after Knight F3. Maybe he doesn't want the pin or something. Okay, so he plays H3, which normally, okay, you'd be cautious about. Knight C6, Knight F3. It's clear, he wants to maintain his E5 pawn without being pinned. He wants to be able to support it easily with this knight without being pinned. Queen C7, and here white's castled. I think it's too dangerous to take on E5 here because of this Bishop B5 check. If we take here, we've got Bishop takes B5 check, haven't we? So that's embarrassing. So black doesn't want to take there. He just puts more pressure, or he handles Bishop B5 with Bishop D7. So is he really threatening to win that pawn? Well, it's protected. And now, I thought black was going to get smashed really quickly. He played H6. And when I saw this on the TV, I thought, here, hold on a sec. Isn't there a big problem with the move H6? And this has really got fascinating. I thought black's going to get smashed here with this next move. I thought surely white can just expose black's position with this next move. Can you guess what looks really tempting? What would look really crushing here to play? If I gave you 20 seconds type from now, what looks quite crushing? No, white to play. That's not a legal move, knight f6. White to play. No, bishop. It's on the lines though. E6. Right. So if takes, we just take here and win this knight. Okay. So bishop takes e6, and now bishop takes g6. So we're threatening queen takes e6 because of that pin. We're threatening the knight, and I just assumed in this position that black, has to. I thought when I was looking on the TV, I thought this position takes and then maybe knight f6 in it. I thought it looks a bit grovelly, doesn't it, this position? But ingenious resource here. After bishop takes g6, can you guess what black actually played in this position? I thought that's really smart, and it's like white's fallen into some sort of weird trap for king safety. So what did black play here? If I give you 20 seconds now, black to play. No, you can't play knight f4. If you play knight f4, I think I just snap that off, and then I just take on e6. Yeah. You can't castle and just take the knight on h5. So I saw it. Someone's mentioned it on PlayChess. Well done. This move just shocks me. Knight g7. It sorts out the knight and it sorts out the bishop. The knight's protecting the bishop. I thought this is quite amusing. How did I miss this move? Because also now, if black can castle queenside, then hold on a sec. Isn't he going to use this g-file against white's king? I thought this is really ingenious stuff. This is fantastic stuff. He's going to get an attacking position against the top seed in the tournament. Isn't he? Is this being over optimistic? Okay, so white now plays bishop e4, and black did castle. Oh, I've got the score sheet wrong here. Oh, my score sheet is messed up for the castling queenside. I'm gonna have to play it myself. Oh no, hang on. Score sheet alert. Pardon me. Hold on a sec. Oh, I see what's gone wrong. Sorry, hold on a sec. Do I? Just repairing my PGN for a moment. Bear with me. Okay, let's try and put this back and go back to this position. Alright, so we got the position here. Bishop e4, castles queenside. I thought, wow, this game's really livened up. From the moment I thought black was getting smashed, now I think black's got some prospects here. And this knight can even crawl back into the centre with knight f5. The rook can use g8, and black will be threatening bishop takes h3. But there's a little bit of an issue here with the king over here. We see knight a3 as though there's a nice use for knight b5. And one of the issues as well with knight b5 is that this bishop wants to come to this diagonal, surely. So if the queen does move, then we play bishop f4. And things start to be staring at black's king. So if only black gets a bit of time, he can use this road. He's got an open road to the king, but will he get enough time to make use of it? We see bishop d5, inviting knight b5, which is played. Now I guess if black tried to extinguish knight b5, it might be too slow. Maybe an aggressive move like b4, just try and open lines up quickly, would threaten b5. You know, the king on the c-file, the queen on the c-file, you'd think that the c-file is quite dangerous. So actually we didn't see a6, we see bishop d5. So knight b5, the queen goes to b6. And white really doesn't give black a chance to start making use of this open road. A forcing move, bishop takes d5, rook takes d5. And I assumed that this forcing move should be investigated before it was played. I thought it compromises a bit the d4 square, c4. It does protect the knight, attack the rook, but it weakens a bit d4. And you can imagine if knight f5 later and bishop g7, black's going to get a good grip on d4. But anyway, so rook d8. I was also thinking, well, surely, hang on, another possibility, if bishop f4 is unpleasant, you know, with things like bishop c7, then what about like rook f5? Is that outlandish to try and play rook f5? And I wasn't really sure about this position either. It looks as though the rook's a bit odd on f5. And if white wants to explore, you know, to check out this forcing move, I'm not really sure. Does it weaken white's king? g4, is it needed? What does white play here? I wasn't really sure what was going on here, but the rook actually dropped back to d8. And now, to my surprise, instead of bishop f4, which looks quite tempting, also for, you know, for bishop c7 and stuff, white actually just sharpened things up now with b4. So this kind of puts again questions potentially to the queen and on this diagonal. So black's not really given a chance here to exploit the g-file, but he tries to give himself a chance to control d4 by playing knight e6, and after b takes c5 he sacrifices a pawn very resourcefully, I thought, with queen a5. And it looks as though if black can get in bishop g7, he's got overprotecting d4. It looks like very positional pawn sacrifice all of a sudden. So I thought he's really giving a good fight here to his grandmaster opponent. Rook b1, bishop g7, queen c2, rook d7. But somehow there was some doubt about this. Because even though this looks like not a fantastic extra pawn, the black king is still looking a little bit on the unsafe side. We see bishop d2, queen a6, and now rook b3, as though, you know, doubling might be desirable. But now knight cd4, so, you know, black's got that grip on d4 and he's using it to get rid of some pieces. So knight f takes, knight takes, knight takes, bishop takes. And I thought, surely, okay, if he can protect b7, isn't that, you know, the worst is over nearly? Rook fb1, queen c6, and it looks as though, okay, he just needs to take here, and isn't the worst over, I thought. I mean, what do you guys think here? Is black play brilliantly or what? He's going to get back his pawn, and his position looks quite stable, doesn't it? I mean, what would you say? Would you prefer white or black here if I give you 20 seconds to evaluate this position? It's not just the G file, if black can use the D file as well, and this bishop doesn't look too bad on this diagonal in principle. Okay, so we see bishop f4, and black plays e5, blunting the bishop on that diagonal, bishop g3. But here I think it's here that black may have played a suspect move. He's done really well to get to this position, but I think this next move might be kind of suspect. His next move, I think he should just consider taking the pawn perhaps with the queen. I should have really checked this out thoroughly, but this next move I think I know is a mistake. Not bishop takes c5, because bishop takes e5. Surely if he plays bishop takes c5, bishop takes e5, but maybe queen takes c5, unless queen f5 here looks dangerous for rook takes b7. We're pinning that. b6. I'm not sure black deserves to get mated anyway. I'm not entirely sure black deserves to get mated, but this next move is e4. Now, does that ring any alarm bells to any of you to play e4 here? What does that actually say to you? I mean, one of the things it says is perhaps it indicates that black is willing to play e3 at some point for f takes, then take here, and he'd have this glorious g file with a weak lemon pawn on e3, and it's white's king that would seem to be in danger. I think that was the idea, that the idea of e3, and then the g file's undermined. But unfortunately, there's some things pointed out about this move. Okay, this bishop is a monster. Yes. Especially if there's a battery with the queen. And this next move, queen c1, threatens to slip into f4 and play queen b8 checkmate, which is a bit of a problem. And you might think, well, e3, surely e3. Okay, e3 is played, and if white does play, f takes e, I don't know what would you play here with white? If you have a look at this position, what would you play if I gave you 20 seconds here, starting from now? White to play. I think this is a great time. Well, f takes e looks like a disaster for me. It weakens g3 for a start. Okay, you're left with this lemon pawn, and really black is going to have pressure on g3, and that looks quite pleasant. No, white just sacrifices the exchange. Rook takes e3. He wants this queen to work with the bishop and for his king to be safe. So much for this g file. It seems as though white's king is looking literally rock solid now. Black didn't bother taking on e3. Black played bishop takes c5. So he's accepting being a pawn down. And now after rook f3, it doesn't look that great. We see queen g6, keeping an eye at least on b1, tying down the queen. But rook b5, a horrible forcing move. And now we see, if the bishop moves back, then maybe c5 looks horrendous. So the bishop doesn't want to allow that. He plays actually b6. And guess what white plays here? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Okay, I mean, I was expecting, I think you need to look at rook queen f4. I mean, let's have a quick look. So we're threatening mate, but maybe, you know, bishop d6, maybe bishop d6, or even maybe check first. Bishop d6. Is that so bad? Anyway, what was played seems much more crushing, actually. White actually played rook takes c5 check. And this is really naughty, because all of a sudden, you know, there's a loose piece over here. That's a loose rook, and all of a sudden it's highlighted with queen b2. I thought, why, blimey, this is sight on the whole board. This poor rook on h8 is targeted. So it doesn't really give black much time to do anything. Interestingly, I did check this out with an engine. Now, say black actually resigned here, but say he does play check, and now he just plays here to invite the check here. I think there's actually rook f6 in this position. The queen moves, and now you play check, and it's all pretty dire after this. Check, and it starts to get a bit messy for black. Maybe not this exact position. Pardon me. Let's go back here. I think it was definitely rook f6 first. Let's say queen g5. Check. Oh, hang on, check. This is mating, for example, because queen takes f7. That's sufficient, isn't it? So that's sort of, I think rook f6 is absolutely crushing, but also I think queen b8 is winning as well. There's a line here which is just, you know, it's horrible. I mean, look at White's king's pretty safe. White's he's got this raging attack. So anyway, he didn't even play the check. He just resigned here after queen b2. I thought that was an interesting game, a mysterious game, but very interesting. So black's king safety was exposed before white's king was. That g file didn't seem to amount to anything. It was an open road, but you need the cars to go on it, don't you? You can't just have an open road. It needs a lot of time to exploit. So let's have a look at another game. The last game I want to check out. I thought this was interesting. Peter Wells, another British Grandmaster, Peter Wells. If I can get it loaded. What have I done? What have I done? I managed to lose my last game. Hang on, if I do edit undo. Oh, I've got it back. So Peter Wells playing against this junior, I think relatively junior player, Linear. So I thought this is interesting. I thought it was interesting. Roy Lopez. So Peter Wells 2479 Grandmaster playing white, and it looks as though black's playing a solid, like, classical system, and that's what I find interesting about this game. That white plays a4, fair enough, d3. Which, you know, aims to sort of make this bishop look a bit silly, maybe. Try and create this wall against that bishop. d6, knight bd2, knight a5, bishop drops back. c5, knight f1, queen c7, h3. It all looks really classical so far. Knight e3. But now things get really quite kind of crude, kind of quickly. I thought g6. Okay, so white plays knight g5, asking the rook to go back or something to defend f7. So it goes back, and then we see knight g4. And I don't remember any master games like this. And that's what really intrigued me. I've seen all these like thousands of Ruy Lopez games, but I don't remember anything which looks so kind of simple to get an attack going. I think this must have been a mistake around here. Black played knight takes g4, which kind of invites the queen to be a menace after queen takes g4. It seems white simply threatening, you know, queen h4 and to soften black up at the very least, into playing horrible moves. So we see actually this bishop's quite menacing, and black tries to block it out with c4, and we get this direct move, threatening mate, you know, queen h4, threatening mate. So bishop takes g5, but it gives up the dark square bishop. So these dark squares look juicy now for white. And black plays now f5, and we see d takes c4, b takes c4, and it looks as though, well, this bishop's blocked in. Maybe black's got a point, you know, he's counter-attacking in the centre. This f file might be good. But now white plays b4, and this means that if, you know, if knight c6, we can just take here with check. So c takes, and white's now threatening b4 check. Black is in trouble, it seems, already here. He takes on e4, check, and knight c4 in principle doesn't look good to have a piece pinned to the king. Now, can you guess what white played in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. So white to play here. What would you play as white? What white's playing? No, it's not. No, not bishop e7. Not rook c1. No one? You know, black might be threatening to play d5 soon, and, you know, make sure this bishop's blunted. White played rook takes e4, cuts across that d5 plan, you know, threatening to win that knight. And black didn't dare take on e4 here. If black dares take on e4, queen takes e4, horrible pin. I mean, say rook c8, I think just rook c1 is winning material. I don't think this can be got out of, this pin. So he didn't bother taking on e4, he played d5. And white continues energetically destroying black's centre ambitions by playing rook takes c4. So an exchange sack, powerful exchange sack. I suppose a bit like the game we just saw with Gawain Jones. This exchange sack here is very nice, because these bishops are really quite dangerous and complementary against the king, and that's shown already with well, if king h8, bishop f6 check, it's not looking too good here for black's king safety. He plays king g7, bishop h6 check, so white gets back the exchange immediately. Bishop takes, rook takes, rook d1. Okay, so white's just one pawn up, but it seems, you know, a nice position. Black plays e4, and now we see queen h6. The rook moves. Bishop f1. It looks as though b5 is quite tasty potentially if white wants to pass pawn over there. Queen f7. But no, doesn't bother with that. It just plays queen e3 here. Okay, king g8. Now rook d6, he controls that d file, and he can put a battery on the d file to really control it. In fact, after queen c7, queen d4 now, and white is actually threatening bishop c4 check. Look at that. Bishop c4 check is a real menace. As well as this rook d7, so this looks really, really unpleasant. And in fact, black decided to resign here after queen d4. There's too many threats, it seems. I thought that was an interesting game. So that's my game selection from the British Championship. I thought they're all pretty interesting games. I hope you found them interesting in some respects. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube. Hope you have a good week. See you next week. Thanks very much.